Are you a solopreneur looking to 2 times your revenue to fund your lifestyle and give back? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you inspirational guests sharing actionable tips to solve many of the struggles you face each and every day. And now over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you enjoy it, please subscribe. If you're a regular, thanks for your support. Love to get your feedback at paul@buildlivegive.com. It means the world to me when you do. Our guest today is someone who worked in social enterprise and loved teaching, which led to improving the lives of others. They then started to work for their family business because they knew that they just couldn't continue to work for others. As a hobby in the background, they were a paid voice actor, and having deep entrepreneurial roots, in particular from her parents, she looked at how to monetize it. They have been helping leaders share their wisdom through voice ever since. You will experience firsthand how to do an on-air ad. I love this interview and I hope you do as well. So why listen? 3 tips to improving your podcast, where the podcast industry is headed and how you can benefit, and how LinkedIn has become a virtual conference and how you can participate in it. What I'll do now is hand you over to Tina Dietz from Twin Flames Studios. Welcome, Tina Dietz from Twin Flames Studios to the Build, Live, Give podcast. Tina, great to have you on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Paul.
Yeah, look, I've been looking forward to this interview for a long time, given your experience, which we'll delve into more. But why don't we start with something that your family or friends would know about you that we may not?
Oh, let's see. How vulnerable do I want to be here?
Look, go for it.
I'll go for it. Actually, if you get to know me and you end up coming over to my house, I love having people over for dinner. I've often had people say that I'm an Italian grandmother in training, which I take as a great compliment.
Yes.
I often, to unwind, will do what I call kitchen karaoke, which is basically turning on karaoke while I'm cooking in the kitchen and encouraging other people to join along. And these are full performance karaoke because it's much more important to be as free and as ridiculous as possible. I find this incredibly therapeutic. So bursting into song at a moment's notice is something you really have to watch out for if we want to be friends.
And does this include dress-ups? Do you take it that
far? In an
ideal
world, yes.
And what have you been doing? Obviously, in the time of this recording and release, we're still in it may end up being one of the worst pandemics in the world's history. What are you doing to supplement this fantastic gift you have?
To supplement in this time of the coronavirus, to supplement it? Can you clarify what that means?
In other words, you can't have, in Australia, I know we can't have people over for dinner. So what are you doing instead of?
Well, I'm not really doing instead of. It's more of a also and. My kids by now, they know they either need to just enjoy it, join in, or leave. Those are basically your 3 choices in this scenario. And so it just depends on their mood. And my husband, same thing. And he fortunately will join in. And sometimes I do have friends and colleagues, occasionally family members join me over video for ridiculousness. We've been known to, show up in weird costumes or makeup or things like that. My beloved husband has allowed me, his facial hair grows very quickly, but he's usually clean shaven. And I've even talked him into growing out his facial hair for a week or 2, just so I can do ridiculous things with it and give him different looks. So he's been very tolerant.
Excellent. Well, it's completely up to you, but maybe you could share one of those videos for us in the show notes, just to give people a visual representation of what you're talking about.
I'll consider it.
All right. No pressure here, but we would love to see that more. So I know you sort of started, I'll summarize it by social enterprise or enterprises working for them for quite some time. And then in 2014, you launched Twin Flame Studios. Just take us a little bit through the transition of, working for others to now running your own business.
Well, I actually stepped off into working for myself several iterations before Twin Flame Studios. And that was a transition working for, I was a therapist by training, but grew up as an entrepreneur. and spent a number of years trying to work with other people, really not having a good time dealing with bureaucracy.
Yes.
And then started a family business with my dad. And people always say to me, well, when you were business coaching years ago, why didn't you specialize in family business? And I said, because I would like to remain sane and unmedicated. So family business is a very particular animal. And I grew up in family business and had them since. And I love my father. And I definitely would not do that again. But it was where I learned online business, where I cut my teeth on that with a company called the Nyada Institute of Massage. He's a very gifted massage therapist. And so then I started my consultancy from there in business coaching and consulting, worked on that for many years, and then took a turn when I wanted to scale my company into audiobooks and podcasting because of my deep and abiding love of microphones.
Because it does seem like when I read through your LinkedIn profile, I know we know each other through a group we're both in.
Yeah.
But it did seem like a bit of a leap out of nowhere. It was,
I know.
So just, fill that little leap in for us.
So what happened was I had I've been in favor, it's not just the karaoke, I've been in favor of anything involving a microphone since I was very, very small. And part of what I loved about being a coach and kind of being out as a public speaker and everything was being on stage and the entertainment value as well as the education and the inspiration that goes along with that. And I had been taking voice acting lessons and ended up picking up an agent and kind of having a paid hobby in voice acting on the side. Took some master classes in audiobook narration because being an entrepreneur, I can't just have a hobby. I have to have a hobby you can monetize.
Yes.
This is what we do. And I had a light bulb go off in that moment as I was finishing up that series of courses. Why aren't all my colleagues and clients who are doing books and bestseller launches, why aren't they doing audiobooks? And that just set off this, what Michael Gerber from the E-Myth would call an entrepreneurial seizure. And I couldn't let it go. I couldn't put it down. It was one of those things. I got really excited. And it still took me several years to come back around to allowing myself to create this new branch of a company because it did seem like such a disconnect. And I even had business coaches tell me, why do you want to do done for you services that's going to damage your reputation as a subject matter expert? And I was like, well, wait a minute. Why can't I have it all? Why can't I have both? And it really was when I allowed myself to go into the niche, however you want to say it.
Yes.
And allow myself to go deep into this world of audio and being of service to other people and having a scalable company. It's, that everything really took a major turn for me, both as an expert and in terms of the financial success of the company.
Excellent. Well, look, I've got so many questions I could ask, but one of them I think is, you seem like a natural speaker, and I find that a lot of people from the US they're very, very eloquent. It seems natural for them, whereas a lot of people in other countries, etc., don't find that. And they, certainly for me, when I first started recording my podcast, I couldn't stand the sound of my own voice. So just give people listening now some tips on, how do you get over that you really cannot stand listening to your own voice? Yeah,
it is a funny thing. When I speak, and I'll ask quite often the question, how many of you don't like the sound of your own voice? And in a room of, executives and whatnot, almost everybody in the room will raise their hand. And even in rooms of podcasters or public speakers, I get more than half the room. It's a very human thing because of this, just the resonance of our skull structure. We sound foreign to ourselves when you hear yourself on tape. I'm a child of the 80s, so I say on tape. But and it's displacing, it's disorienting. It's like it feels like you're listening to an alien. So when people don't like the sound of their own voice, most of the time it's because you have this incongruency, and the brain hates incongruency. So to fix that, truly what it is repetition. You have to get used to it. And sometimes I'll just have people listen back to the sound of their own voice and say nice things back to themselves. about what they like about their voice. Another good way to do it is to record something where you are saying something nice to yourself. Having somebody read off a whole series of affirmations, for example. I'm worthy, every day I'm getting better, and so on and so forth. Give them a list, have them read a recording of that, and then play back that recording. Because then you're actually talking to yourself in a positive way. You're kind of creating a new voice in your head that likes you. So you start to associate the sound of your voice with positive things, with good things. And that's just kind of helpful all the way around. So really, in this particular case, the only way out is through. And in terms of liking your own voice, because that's completely a subjective judgment. No one, I guarantee you, nobody out there has ever hung up on anybody who's listening to the show because, oh God, I can't stand the sound of your voice. I'm not talking to you.
Yes, so true. And look, I cheat a little because if I do listen to myself, I listen at 2.5, 3 times speed for most things. It's just built it up over time. So I must admit I sound a lot better at 2 times. So if you're currently listening at 1, just dial it up a bit. It's I'll sound a lot
like
better.
A hedgehog. Yeah, I'll sound like a hedgehog.
Yeah, or a chipmunk.
It'd be perfect.
Yes. Now, and probably, let's be fair, that's for the solo shows. I think Tina sounds much better in 1 times. But so hobbies and monetizing them. There's a lot of people at the moment that are going through, very unprecedented times. And some of them may be thinking, well, this might be the big time to take a leap. Okay. So, I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to go create. So any tips on how you start to monetize that hobby?
Okay. So I have a little bit of 2 minds about this because I truly don't believe that the whole follow your passion and the money will follow is really true. There's a little more thinking to it than that, because there are certain things that we do that we love that if we had to make a living from them, it might kind of kill the creativity. And so that's one of the things you have to consider. So when I was coming up with this whole idea around the audiobooks and the podcasting and everything, I had to really step back and consider, it's like, well, where does this come from? Why is this important? Or why do I want to do this? Is it the burning passion that I want to do for the rest of my life? No, but it's a medium that I can be a contribution in. I can help people get their voices out to the people who need to hear them. So that, for me, from a values perspective, is very important. So I actually think it's more important to look at what are your values, and what you're creating, how is it going to fulfill those values? It's kind of the first thing to look at. The second thing is you have to be able to consider the ramifications of stepping off. And I've helped so many people through this transition back when I was business coaching. There comes a point where the pain of staying and doing something you don't love is greater than the pain of dealing with the financial impact. It's very much of an existential thing. At the same time, if you can have a backup, if you can have a bridge, if you can have savings, if you can have something there and create a plan, or at least have some kind of proof that what you're stepping off into is actually possible for you to monetize before you leave the comfortable job. Side hustles are great. Side hustles are really important, but I don't recommend that anybody step off into their side hustle as a job, into a whole enterprise, until they've proven to themselves that they can make at least $1,000 a month from that enterprise. There needs to be some kind of proof that you've got some kind of engine going.
I wish I had heard that, Tina, back in 2011. Because I did the complete opposite. I went from one day...
I did the same thing.
Yeah, one day a director at Coca-Cola, the next day, who am I? I walked into a room and like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing, let alone explaining it to somebody else. But that's great advice. And, speaking of advice and supporters, right, you talked about your dad and working with your dad, and you eloquently, didn't end all of that sentence. So if your dad's listening now, Tina absolutely loves working with you. But But who else sort of supported you through this journey?
Well, I did have, because I have entrepreneurial parents. They were very supportive of this particular journey, and my kid's dad, who I was married to at the time, through this whole beginning process of starting a business and going through different iterations of the business. I had a lot of side hustles before I decided to step off into my own thing full time. And I didn't take all my own advice, but I did have clients and I did have kind of a proven framework. And I had a tremendous amount of failure also, and different things, was able to keep going. So he was, very supportive in all the ways that he knew how to be. And, we had young children at the time and everything, and he's a great dad. So I'm forever grateful for that support. And at least the people who didn't understand, who aren't entrepreneurs and they didn't quite get what was going on, at least they weren't cruel or dismissive. And and now I've had people come back to me over the years and go, "Oh, okay, all right, got it." That's so I'm grateful for that as well.
Yeah, I find for any of my friends that unfortunately in Australia often receive a redundancy. The next call is normally to me. And yes, so tell me, how do you make money while being in your tracksuit pants at home, your track pants at home? So yes, I know exactly what you're saying with that transition. So the next section is the build section. So we've already talked about audiobooks and obviously your love of kitchen karaoke. But when someone says to you, Tina, what do you do? How do you best answer that?
I say that we amplify the voices of leaders, entrepreneurs, and trusted brands all over the world. And our mediums for doing that are podcasts, our audiobooks, and working with people to really refine their vocal leadership so they can make the impact that they want to make and reach the people that they need to reach. It's really all about having people get what they need so that they can grow. Books and podcasts are some of the lowest hanging fruit for people to change their lives.
Yeah, and what are some of the key, what am I saying, obstacles, barriers? Why are people so reluctant to launch a podcast?
Well, podcasting is a lot of work. I usually recommend that if you are not familiar with podcasts as a medium, and you haven't been a guest on at least a couple to get a lay of the land, then please don't start a podcast from scratch. And specifically talking about podcasting for business, that there's really two kinds of podcasting: podcasting as a business and podcasting for your business. So this wonderful, fabulous podcast that you have, Paul, is podcasting for your business. It's part of your brand. It's part of your platform. It's how you reach your audience. It's wonderful to network with other professionals, and it just creates a home for you to welcome people into, to have these conversations. It's fabulous. Well, that's podcasting for your business. Podcasting as a business is when somebody starts a show specifically to monetize it, and it's usually sponsor based and things like that. And those podcasts tend to be your true crime podcast, your very specialty podcasts like the Horse Radio Network, or the show Trivial Warfare, which is pub trivia, but in a podcast format. Really fantastic shows, but those are high entertainment value and really designed to be businesses in and of themselves. So these are all things you have to think about beforehand. So strategy, planning, how much time you want to put into it. It's super important before you decide to go ahead and launch a show.
Yeah, and you've seen enormous change in the 6 years, you've been running Twin Flames. What do you see in the next, 5 to 6 years? Where do you see podcasting, either under, both segments? Where do you see it going?
Well, Seth Godin has been saying that podcasting is the new blogging. So I think that much like how blogging evolved over the years, we're going to see a lot of people in the next few years really flock to podcasting as a personal project. Not every podcast has to be monetized. It can be a passion project. It can be something you just love to do. And I never want to kill anybody's dream of doing that because I understand the love of the microphone and connecting with people. I'm the first person to say that. At the same time, I think we're going to see a lot more corporate influence in podcasting. And this is not necessarily a bad thing because it does bring more dollars to the table and it brings more credibility to the medium. So we are seeing more large companies jump into podcasting, not even just for external podcasting, but for internal podcasting, using podcasting for internal communications, for making sure that in a workforce that maybe is working from home or on the road, that you can keep a culture strong and have communications be out there, celebrate each other's wins, all of the good stuff. So that's another trend that I think we're going to continue to see more and more of. And I think we're also going to see more businesses seeing the value in podcasting as an advertising medium and jumping in and doing long form narrative podcasting, the kind of podcast you'd hear on maybe National Public Radio in the US. It's very storytelling based, but for business. And there's companies like Pacific Content who are already doing this with companies like Facebook and Charles Schwab and all that. I think that's also going to continue as well. So I think it's an exciting and evolving world. I'm thrilled to be part of it.
Yeah, and I know, coming from the Coke company and a marketing background, you had to measure everything. And it's hard to measure things in marketing, but particularly in podcasts, it's been very difficult to measure things. How do you see the measurement supporting more dollars coming into to the advertising spend? Sure.
Yeah, where we're seeing the research coming out is in things like sticky branding and the listeners of podcasts reporting to survey companies and like Edison Research, who go out and do a lot of podcast research, reporting that they're 80% more likely to purchase a brand that they've heard on a podcast that a host has endorsed. Host-read ads, it's really important that the ads are endorsed by the host, that they're tested by the host, and there's a relationship with the host. That's really the magic of advertising or sponsorship through podcasting. This audio-only medium is pretty intimate. Back when I was the lead interviewer on the podcast documentary, The Messengers, I interviewed 40 or 50 different podcasters, and almost none of them knew each other. And the word intimacy just kept coming up and kept coming. Every single person mentioned it, that their communities had this bond and this intimacy over these topics. And maybe it was business, or maybe it was about, being part of a certain group, or maybe it was a part of being a community that was part of a fandom around a television show, and the things that would happen for people to support each other, even though they had never met. So there's so much available here for us to explore. Storytelling is universal, and it's important. Going back to the numbers, though, and this is why I think we're going to see a lot more around internal podcasting. It's actually very easy to track the numbers around internal podcasting in terms of engagement. And engagement is a huge issue in worldwide in the marketplace for companies to, increase engagement. We hear this over and over again in human resources and executive circles. We have to increase engagement. We have to retain our talent. We need to increase efficacy, all those things. And internal podcasting, there are, specific measures and numbers that we can draw on that for that. Little harder for external podcasting, but I'm hoping that we'll see some breakthroughs in that area as well.
And, you hear in numbers, 700,000 podcasts, et cetera. There's lots of podcasts. So I often talk to coaches and consultants and they say, look, I don't think the world needs another podcast. What do you say when you hear that from potential clients?
I think that's entirely possible. I mean, there's a whole world of podcast guesting that is just as valuable in many cases as having your own podcast. I work a lot with executives and CEOs on their podcast messaging and the vocal leadership work that I do to have them be able to understand how to be interviewed on a podcast and what kind of content there is and the storytelling and, how do you create a relationship with someone without seeing their face and interacting live? All of those things, right? And so I think that's just part of the world we're in right now. And it's okay if you don't want to start your own podcast. And maybe that's not your entry point, but considering podcasting in all of its formats, internal podcasting, external podcasting, podcast guesting, or maybe your brand even advertises on podcasts as a sponsor. That's another option too. It's a medium that's not going away. So how can we use it for our companies, our businesses, our brands to utilize it in its best way for you?
And I know that I'm engaging you to order my podcast, which I'm
Sure.
a little nervous about, especially as having you as a guest today.
No worries.
But what are some of the key themes that you look for when auditing a podcast? If someone could think of, well, this is what an expert like Tina's looking at, so I can at least go and address some of those areas in my podcast today. What would be those key themes?
Sure, absolutely. A couple of the basic things, and this is usually in the setup of your podcast, are making sure you're in the right categories. You're able to get into 3 categories and subcategories in most cases, and making sure that that's aligned with what you're doing. The second thing is your show name something that people are going to understand when they see it? Is that show name going to immediately attract the people that you want as listeners? And this is where we really run into that push-pull we sometimes have in our hearts about wanting to reach everyone. Because the truth is, podcasts work better when they are niche and when they reach a deep audience rather than a wide audience. That's for podcasting for your business. Podcasting as a business is a different animal.
Yes.
So just keep having to make that distinction. But when people see themselves immediately in your title and your content, they're much more likely to become loyal listeners faster. So that's really important. The other thing is the length of your podcast. Probably the question I get asked the most about podcasting is, how long should my podcast be? And the true answer to that is however long you can be outrageously interesting for. Because in a solo show, truthfully, most people cannot be super interesting for longer than 20 minutes. It's really hard. It's really, really hard to do. It's a lot of material to write because what is interesting to you in your head and what you're teaching might be valuable content, but is it entertaining? Because entertainment is the most important thing about podcasting. It's more important than education. It's more important than inspiration. All of those things are secondary to entertainment. So that's where it comes into play. So we say, 20 minutes for a solo, 40 minutes for an interview is our general rule of thumb when you're working with podcasting for a business. Could it be longer? Yes. There are certain cases where that may happen, certain industries where people really love in-depth content, but that's the general rule of thumb to consider. So those are some of the first things that we start looking at. There's more. We can keep going if you want.
No, that's brilliant. That's look, I think it's top 3 and yeah, for me, I find certainly some of the big commercial podcasts, I find a little frustrating where, of that 40 minutes, let's say, or most of them are an hour, the ones that I listen to, might be 10 minutes of that are the same ads every time. And, I always skip the start. I've got an ability, I use the Pocket Cast app. So I skip the start. I try to skip the end, which I know is just, noise. But, for you giving advice to people doing that or people like for myself, how long should ads be? Where should they be? Just give us a little bit of advice on that.
Well, this is where creativity comes into play. And as I mentioned before, host-read ads are far more important, but where can you create storytelling around those ads? Do you have any particular sponsors that you have, Paul, or that you've heard of, or maybe one you'd like to have?
Yes, no, I have, and you're going to hear that shortly.
Okay.
But yes, I have got a sponsor.
Okay, so what's the name of your sponsor? I just want to do a little
it's Dub,
play here.
DUBB.
And they do some kind of, their work video production, right?
Yes.
Video hosting?
Yes.
Okay, great. And what's one thing you really love about them?
The ability to break through all of the noise, especially on LinkedIn. A lot of people send text, it's all boring, whereas when I send video on LinkedIn, it really gets a lot better response.
Okay, great. And is it dub.com?
Yes.
Okay. So on a host read ad, it might be something like, guys, I want to give a mention here to a tool I've been using lately. Have you guys heard of dub.com? There's a lot of video production platforms out there, but what I'm loving about Dub is that I'm getting much higher engagement on LinkedIn. And you guys, I know I love LinkedIn. I do a lot of networking on LinkedIn. So it's important for me to have tools I can rely on. So I'm encouraging you all to check out dub.com, two B's in that, DUBB.com, and see how you like it. I'd love your feedback. I'd like to know if you're using it. Tag me in your posts on or on LinkedIn if you decide to use this tool, and let's compare notes. So check it out at dub.com.
And that's why you have experts on your podcast. That was brilliant. I'll be slightly adjusting that so I don't have to pay a royalty, but that's brilliant. And,
Sorry.
and I'm a little embarrassed now because I realized that that's actually to my solo podcast, not to my interview podcast. So I will be reading another slot and in a moment. But look, that was brilliant. And, you talked about LinkedIn. So I know we've been working together for a little bit on LinkedIn. And, tell us a little bit about the journey so far on LinkedIn for you.
Well, I've got a large social media following, around almost 200,000. And at the same time, I've been frustrated with social media for a long time. It helps with our SEO, certainly. It helps with our visibility. And at the same time, we don't tend to get a lot of business from our social media presence. And that is why this last year I reached out to you, because we're turning our attention to LinkedIn. Relationships are what are most important to me. And we had a mutual colleague, Harry Duran, who's also a podcast consultant, introduced the two of us. And it's in the months that we have been, working with the BLG Collective and you on LinkedIn, it's fascinating. It's been kind of night and day. I think the best way I can put it, it's the difference between going to a conference. When I go onto LinkedIn, I feel like I'm walking into a conference. It's just a giant room full of people. And some of them I know and some of them I don't know, but it's this, thousands of people in a room. And having the experience of working with this collective, it's like a little pod or a mastermind inside of LinkedIn. So, I've gotten now to know some of these people and their work, and we're helping each other, with our networks. I'm finding fantastic referrals, gaining referral partners, meeting people I never would have met before outside of my circles, which is really valuable because it's like walking into a whole new room or a whole new conference, and reaching people like crazy. I mean, the amount of views and who's commenting and the response that we're getting it's just been great. I'm super excited about continuing to build on it because I know, it's been a couple of months and I'm just scratching the surface of what's possible.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, look, before we go into the live section, I do a live ad. And what I'm going to not do is read out what I normally would, given what Tina has given an absolute masterclass from the Dub. But if you do want to find out more about our community, so it's called Build, Live, Give Authority Machine. It helps you be seen as an expert, and it's so important in these times. And, we've all received communication through LinkedIn that you think, really? Like, did you really read this before you sent it? And what we do is help you build those relationships. And there's a great free live masterclass that you can watch. It's around 30 minutes. As I said, with my voice, I'd speed it up so you can get through it in 15. All you have to do is go to blgclick.com and you can watch that. And also there's lots of tasks there in LinkedIn that can be done by somebody else. It doesn't have to be by you. So if you haven't got a virtual assistant and you'd like to know more about that and how we use them to expedite both your authority and also new clients, just go to buildlivegive.com/VA. So the next section is the live, as I said, Tina. So what are some daily habits that make you successful?
Well, I do have a daily habit of meditation and exercise. So that's how I start my day. And it's funny, it took me a long time to get into the meditation part of things. I've been a pretty loyal exerciser off and on, more on than off, for the last 15 years or so. But the meditation is something I resisted, which is funny because both my parents are yoga teachers. But I finally surrendered to that, and I'm so glad I did because it's really really important right now, as well as the exercise. And I also make sure I laugh at least once a day, whether it's with my kids or watching something funny. A lot of times it's with my husband, just being silly and making each other laugh. I really need that connection. So those are probably my top three. I also have a routine of certain supplements I take to support my body and water intake and things like that. So health and wellness is very important to me.
Yeah, well, I think, you're eating at least once a day, if not more. And if you're doing that, through karaoke in the kitchen, I'm sure you have more than one laugh a day. And as I subtly said before, we'd love to see a little video, even if it's a glimpse that we can share it with our audience. That would be great. And, we're going through COVID-19 at the moment. You've talked about it briefly, but what are some of the learnings that you've gained through COVID that you will take on outside, out the other end?
Well, I have had this really interesting experience because as much as I would have preferred this not happen, it feels as though have been uniquely prepared to go through this experience. And I'm unbelievably grateful for that. So I feel like I've been waiting 20 years to be in the right place at the right time. It's very strange to say that in light of all this, but I have been running in a mobile business for more than a dozen years. And my children are used to living a mobile lifestyle. They were homeschooled while we lived in Costa Rica some years ago. So, and they're old enough to be very kind of independent on things. So we haven't had a tremendous amount of stress load put on us. And what that has allowed us to do is reach out and help more people. So we have gone back out to our current clients, our former clients, and made additional offers of help and support, teleclasses with their teams on vocal leadership, just to do it, not charging for it or anything like that, to help out through this particular process. And I have had a tremendous amount of influx of people who are home, a lot of public speakers or companies that are now like, okay, well, now's the time. Let's look at our online presence. Maybe we want to do a podcast. Maybe I want to do that audiobook. And it's just a privilege to be able to help people through that. So, I can't really complain about being in this situation because if this had to happen, then I couldn't be in a better place to have to deal with it. To be completely honest, and that's really it. It's a matter of actually energy management and making sure that I'm not overworking like crazy because we are, trying to help as many people as we can and working really long hours to do so.
Yes. And Robin, who's your partner, he's going to be listening right now. What would you like to say to him about the support he's given you through this journey?
Oh, wow. Well, Robin is not just my husband. He is, oh God. It's one of those situations where if people knew how good our relationship was, they wouldn't believe me. It is kind of at that point. And I know that sounds super Pollyanna and all that, but we've kind of worked our butts off to have it be that way. But Robin also works in the company with me on the operational side, and he's a 30-year software engineer and data architect, and he brings dimensions to the company that to me seem like magic. I'm creative, I'm a visionary, I'm a people person, and he's like, why are we doing it this way? Why don't we just automate it? Why don't we create this system? All of that. And it's beautiful to have that ebb and flow. And so support doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what he's provided and who he is in all of this. And we don't get tired of each other. We actually feel like during the day, even though we're in the same apartment, we miss each other. We can't wait to kind of like get together at the end of the day because our days are so full so that we can, hang out and kind of after work, so to speak, and have dinner together. And and chill out. So I couldn't be happier to be in quarantine with my husband.
Excellent. Well, look, the next section's the give section. So what's a charity or a community that you're passionate about and why?
Well, one of the charities that I'm involved with is Project Forgive. It was started by Dr. Sean Duperrin, and who's just doing some amazing work. And it's she's gotten the Dalai Lama involved, and many people, Bishop Desmond Tutu, and so many leaders from around the world. And it's really this global mission to bring the spirit of human forgiveness into our communities and into ourselves as well. And she teaches this work called Accepting the Apology You'll Never Receive. And if you can think of somebody, something that you would have loved an apology for, but you'll never get it. Having the experience of actually getting that is transformational on a number of levels. And they are working with municipalities, with colleges, with inside of prison systems and jail systems and all that, to bring this work of forgiveness and bring a lot more compassion to the systems that we live and deal with every day. And I couldn't say enough good things about the work they're doing in the world.
Well, what we're going to do is shift gears a little. So what we're going to do is go into the last section, which is the action section. I'm going to ask you some questions and get some rapid fire responses. So the first one is, what are your top 3 personal effectiveness tips?
Make sure you get enough sleep. Make sure you get enough water. And leave time every week to radically do nothing for at least 2 or 3 hours to give your brain a break and a reset.
Wow, I'll do the first 2. That last one's going to be a challenge, but
I know,
challenge
right?
accepted. Challenge accepted. Right. What tech is essential to running your business?
We run a lot of our company off of G Suite, and even the programming that Robin does hooks a lot into Google's tools. We also love working with Asana for project management. I use Acuity for scheduling. So those are kind of our big things. We stay fairly tech light on things and run things pretty lean. So those are some of my favorite tools inside the company.
Great. And, you get the chance to listen to some amazing podcasts and also audio books, but, what's your best source of new ideas?
Actually, my best source of new ideas is that 2 or 3 hours of doing nothing that I mentioned. It's that brain reset that allows that frontal lobe to remain juicy. Because if you think about it, you almost never get a good idea, really good idea at your desk. Mm-hmm. They always come in the shower or when you're driving or when you're on a walk or something like that. And so that source of new ideas is it's in the quiet, it's in the rest of when that happens.
Now, doing nothing, that means I can't even physically move?
No. But it's more you're not reading a book, you're not listening to a podcast.
You're killing me.
But, you could do some manual things. Manual things are actually kind of part of that, but not hard work, like swimming, maybe a walk, laying under a tree, that kind of stuff. It's a challenge. Yeah. I know. I'm not all that good at it myself, but when I do it, oh man.
Yeah, I must admit, for me to change out of corporate to my own business was spent picking olives for 4 days with my dad.
Oh, wow.
I don't think that that experience would have got me to where I am today if I hadn't have done that. So that was effectively doing nothing for 4 days. So the last question is the big one. I always leave it to the end. But what impact do you want to leave on the world?
So years ago, when I was thinking about starting a business, I had a coach who said, Tina, you have to create something that's so big you can't do it yourself, all by yourself, and might not be something you can finish in a lifetime. And that really pissed me off. And then about a week later, I woke up from a dream where I had this vision of the world where people were all worldwide doing what they loved and bringing that sense of doing what they loved home to their communities and their families. And when they told their kids, yeah, you can do what you love and make a great living, they were telling the truth from a place of integration and integrity. And that became a default setting for those kids for the next generation, for them to pass on. We all have these beliefs. We talk about limiting beliefs. But what if that got turned on its head and our default setting was expansive beliefs? And so having these ideas go out into the world through podcasting and audiobooks and leadership is one of the ways that I want to contribute to creating that world and that vision.
Well, I'm absolutely tingling all over. So what a brilliant impact you want to leave. So you can find out more about Tina at twinflamestudio.com. And also there's a bit of a challenge Tina wants us all to do. Other than, do our own recording of kitchen karaoke and share it, she also wants you to search her name. So it's Tina, and it's Dietz, and see how many slots in the first page of Google she actually covers, because she's telling me there's lots. So
it makes me feel so important.
So let's put it to the test. But look, brilliant having you on, Tina. I love working with you within our LinkedIn group. And as I said, you can find out more about that at blgclick.com. But also, I'm really looking forward to helping me spread people like experts like you, spreading their word further with some of the help you're doing with our podcast. So great having you on, and really enjoyed it.
My absolute pleasure, Paul. Thank you so much.
Stay well. Bye. I truly enjoyed this one. How good was the on-air ad? Absolutely brilliant. You can find out more about Dub at buildlivegive.com/Dub, and that's DUBB. You can get the show notes at buildlivegive.com. What is your biggest takeaway from Tina? Please share on her socials. She would absolutely love it. If you believe someone would also benefit from the show, please share. You can learn the 3 secrets to building your authority on LinkedIn in a free pre-recorded masterclass at blgclick.com. So that's blgclick.com. Please take action to build your business and lifestyle, and most importantly, stay well.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.